And good morning, folks. Thanks for tuning in on this somewhat foggy but clearing up Tuesday morning. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to step into the Digital Weather Center with me once again. News 6 digital meteorologist David Nazario here to talk all things fog and a bit of a look down the road towards the middle portions of the month, closer to Valentine's Day, where it does seem like we're going to see a return of the winter season fully. Now, we're not expecting a massive dip in our temperatures here in Central Florida, but we will come down out of these 80-degree high temperatures we've been realizing day to day, and will continue to do so as we get into the middle portions of next week on approach for the Valentine's Day, February 14th, give or take, time frame. The weather pattern is going to start to get very busy. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're over on News 6 Plus, Kevin Hawthorne over on the News 6 YouTube channel, good morning. Thanks for tuning in from Lakeland and the rest of you joining us today. Let's go ahead and jump right into it, shall we? So as you can see here, we've updated the weather headlines once again. We are now at just the next big thing. Yesterday, if you managed to tune into our morning update, it was the next big thing / hot. And I know it's not necessarily hot outside, but it is humid, it is foggy, and it is above average in terms of our daytime temperatures, sitting anywhere between 81 to 83 degrees out there currently. And so as a result, we've had to update some of our headlines just a little bit. Let's take you through them step by step. So for the rest of the week, fog is going to start to dissipate. Now, tomorrow morning, we probably are still going to see just a little bit of it hanging out, especially from where it looks to be Brevard, Southern Volusia, Seminole, Orange, and Osceola. It's going to be very central and east side loaded up against the coast, trying to work its way in between the very early morning hours of about 2 to 5 a.m. That's where some of our densest fog or denser fog could exist as we start the day tomorrow, but not nearly as widespread as we woke up to this morning and yesterday. I shared over on my Instagram, I felt like I had to keep looking around. If you ever watched the Stephen King The Mist film or The Fog by John Carpenter, you never know what's lurking out there. God forbid. And then as you can see by the weekend, the warmer temps are going to hang out. We're not going to be changing anytime soon. So despite the fog trying to lift and dissipate some, we're really not going to change the rhythm or the pattern that we're underneath. We're just going to have that somewhat modified maritime tropical high pressure settle in right over top of us. And that's what's going to help to clear out some of that fog and get rid of that stationary tail that I brought you up to speed on yesterday. And then I'll take us full screen once again because I want you to look at that bottom bulletin there. Looking ahead, monitoring for a potential pattern flip by the middle portions of the month. And now when I say a pattern flip, right now we're underneath what's called a negative Pacific North American oscillation. We talked about this yesterday as well. And for those of you who weren't unable to tune in, just a very brief rundown. You can go over to clickorlando.com. I threw out a lovely article this morning covering the breakdown of our polar vortex and what all these different teleconnections mean. But in summary, just means a big old warm ridge out east and a cold trough out west. And whenever that PNA or that long scale or that large scale pattern flips, we replace the two. We go from ridge out east, trough out west. We do this. So we get a trough out east and then a ridge back out west over the desert southwest in the Four Corners area. So first and foremost, actually, you know what? I skipped ahead. Let's go right into this. Warning. I wanted to put a little alarm bell on there, but I could not find the graphic to tell you the truth. So as you can see, some cold could return to Central Florida, and I'll go ahead and get my big old head out of the way so you guys can take in these headlines with me. The facts. We're going to continue to warm over the next 7 days. So for the next 7 or so days between now and the beginning of next week, we will stay at about the 80-degree threshold. Most of us on average between 80 to 83 degrees in the afternoon with relative humidity anywhere between 90 to fully at that realized 100%. The vortex split could occur sometime between the 13th and the 16th of February. Since we are looking long range, it is only the 4th of February, although I shouldn't be saying only. I can't believe it's already 4 days. My birthday was 4 days ago, and the build up to that was insane. And now all of a sudden, yep, already working our way through the month of February. Then the pattern flip could bring much needed temperatures as well as definitely the rainfall beginning to increase. Like I said, the pattern does look to get a little more on the aggravated side. Right now, yesterday we briefed that we're in west to east zonal flow. The jet stream and the overall temperature gradient through the United States, throughout the entirety of North America for all intents and purposes, is fairly uniform. We're warm down in the south and much colder up towards the north. So if you have any relatives, friends, or even team members, coworkers, if you're a remote employee, whoever, further north you go in the United States, they are still in the bona fide winter pattern. Whereas down here, we got the allergies going crazy, the pollinators are in full swing, and it's been feeling a lot like a spring / pseudo summertime fall effect in Central Florida, especially once you factor in the relative humidity, making it feel like we're a lot warmer outside than we are. So moving right along, now we'll get into the visibility. This is where we are currently, and you can see that coastal fog is still butting up against parts of Flagler, Volusia, and Brevard County. Sanford still at about 3 statute miles of visibility. Orlando, a little hazy, if you will. We're down to, or I should say we're up to about a mist. There is a difference between mist and fog per what Air Force weather taught me. Fog is usually the more dense phenomena. You can't see more than a quarter mile, 1/8 of a mile, give or take. With mist, however, you usually have a greater prevailing visibility. And what that means essentially is if you look in a full 360, you swivel around like so, prevailing visibility is a lot further out, and you can see for a few miles through the horizon line to the naked eye as opposed to with fog. Brevard County Transparency Corruption Watch over on the News 6 YouTube channel. Cocoa, Florida, the fog seems to be going up, down, left, right, and that is correct. You can see it right here. We still have an enormous fog bank right along our east coast, and it's going to be going back and forth. You can see Cocoa Beach is currently supposedly unrestricted, with Melbourne to your immediate south at 9 miles, and then Cape Canaveral just to the immediate north at only 2. So there's definitely some funky ongoings with our fog out there, and I'll take you through what our forecasted visibility is expected to be like. And you'll notice as we get further and further into the afternoon, by the hottest part of the day, we're pretty much clear. 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our fog is going to be pretty much burnt off, if not at least lifted up into low stratus by that point. And then as we go overnight tonight, you can see the fog does try to make a return, albeit it's just more so going to be misty out there. Remember what I said moments ago, if you think about it, or not if you think about it, but based on the criteria, mist you can see a lot further away. It's still going to bring down your overall viz, but it's not going to be nearly as immense as the fog, which you can see building back into Volusia and especially Brevard County. It's going to spread in from the coastline and work its way in as the surface of the peninsula continues to cool. But then notice as the sun comes up, if you're anywhere from about Volusia, Seminole, Orange County, maybe trying to get into the northeast periphery of Flagler County, we're seeing some of that real dense stuff working its way through, and that's because of that temperature discontinuity. Once again, so for the sake of time, go on over to clickorlando.com. I'll break all that down, as well as Chief Meteorologist Candace Campos did a lovely explainer on that for our social media earlier this morning. But all in all, once the sun comes up, we rapidly clear that out, and Wednesday is looking a lot better than we had Monday, yesterday, and this morning. So now, let's get into some of the bigger stuff before we get into our first break. This is the water vapor, and if you notice, I have us very, very zoomed out. There's a reason for that, and we're going to go ahead and start to do some doodling again, as I always do with these lovely weather discussions. So here's our polar front jet, kind of trying to take on a bit of what's called a meridional flow. If we look at it from the very, very large scale, what's called the macro scale perspective, we're looking from the northern Pacific all the way through North America up into the North Atlantic, headed towards Europe. And you can see very low amplitude. These waves here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, very low amplitude. They're not extending very far to the north or very far to the south. So one could say we are still under that west to east zonal flow. The reason I would argue it's low amplitude meridional is because if you look, we have an atmospheric river setup beginning to initiate for Northern California and the Pac Northwest, with a nice baroclinic feature right in through there. That tells me that there is a little bit of amplification or enhancement going on with our jet stream. If you kind of take it a little further off towards the east, we have another baroclinic system wrapping up through Atlantic Canada. And you notice where I draw that line, there is that nice curvature to it, which shows it isn't perfect zonal flow. And, naturally, Mother Nature ain't going to behave in black and white straight lines, obviously, but this is more of a low amplitude meridional jet stream. That's just my opinion. I did a lot of synoptic analysis back in the day, so I'm willing to split hairs with some folks. But what I'm also going to be watching very closely is up and through here, the Canadian territories well to our north, up into the Arctic Circle near Greenland, the northern territories of Canada, way up there near the North Pole. That is where the stratosphere could begin to warm and break down our current consistent look in the polar vortex, which is why the jet has been flowing more or less seamlessly. We haven't had any cold air coming down to the south. And then I wanted to pull this up as well. This is, I thought, a very interesting feature because I know a lot of us who love to track the tropics, for example, are probably noticing there's a big old ball of energy down here moving into the Western Gulf. Obviously nothing tropical. I love to bring that up just because I feel like that's my bread and butter ever since starting at News 6. This is an upper low entrenched underneath our dominating ridge pattern down over the south, driving our warm air up. So we have an upper low, little breakaway area of jet energy that's managed to sink itself as far south as southern Texas, northern and eastern Mexico, and then aloft, I'll draw it in a dotted line. We have an enormous ridge that's kind of keeping it from going anywhere. That's why it's just been sitting down there marinating. And that's also why we've been so anomalously warm out here. We have that negative PNA structure directly overhead, and that's also what's keeping this low trapped and in place. It's not really going anywhere. So now, this is where I will leave you. This is going to be a very weird perspective, to tell you the truth. I actually rotated the globe using our Barron Link system, and we're looking from the top down at the entirety of the northern hemisphere. This is to kind of mimic what's called a 5-wave chart, looking at the entire continuous jet stream around the northern hemisphere, looking at our polar vortex where our Arctic polar air masses are, and then tracking what's down the pike headed towards North America that could influence the weather for the United States and then us down here in Central Florida. Because as we all know, everything is connected. So when we come back, please don't go anywhere. Grab some popcorn, grab your favorite drink, and settle in because we're going to get into some sciencey stuff here. Fasten your seatbelts and hold on to your butts, as I like to say, because with the transitions we're going to be seeing in our jet and our overall, I guess you can say, winter air. I'm going to say winter, just be all-encompassing. It's going to cause a lot of disturbed weather, not only for us in Florida doing this again, going back and forth, kind of like a Geiger counter or a seismometer, but at the same time, the rest of the U.S. is going to be feeling a lot of rough impacts. So stand by, folks. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break. Be right back with you. And we're back. The quick 2 minute intermission. Good Lord, I feel like it swoops by as fast as ever. So now let's get into some of the sciencey stuff. We're going to break down a number of different variables, and that's why we're looking at the Earth from the poles right now. You can see Greenland up there, parts of Asia, Russia, the Aleutian Island chain of Alaska. Alaska itself, we're looking at the top down with the hood popped so we can take a look at our polar vortex. And the first thing I want to bring to light so you can actually see what it is we're describing is notice right here this giant blob of our coldest colors, we'll call them, right in through here. I'll even draw it in a little bit further right there. Notice how overall we have a continuous circle slash oval shape right over Greenland, right around the Arctic Circle, which is somewhere right in through here, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I obviously don't look too closely at this part of the Earth. I'm more concerned about what's happening down in our neck of the woods and what's going to be boiling down through Canada into the U.S. But, you know, the general takeaway, this is going to be the northernmost portion of the hemisphere, and see how everything is fully uniform right now. It's just a nice little bundle here. Right there, that big old blob of the lighter pinks, almost the white colors. Now, as I fast forward through time, watch closely what happens here as that feature evolves. So see, we're still continuous, and then look at what starts to happen there. It becomes very, very diffuse and splits in half. Now we have a conglomerate of all sorts of different pieces of this polar vortex. We have a large area back over into Europe and Asia. We have an extension of it all the way down even over here. If you look, the Aleutian low down on the left-hand side of the globe here is also very vigorous with an extension of a ridge right there. And now we have it broken away from where it once was, pushing down towards James and Hudson Bay of Canada, which is going to open the gates, if you will, for our wintry conditions to return to the United States, particularly the central and eastern halves of the U.S. So that there is what you can see visibly with our model data, and then obviously once we get there in real time, our analysis charts will reflect this as well. But that is why we call it a polar vortex split or a polar vortex breakdown. What's happening here is your Arctic oscillation is going into a negative value, which means it's weakening, it's losing its stability. If you tuned in yesterday, remember what I mentioned, that essentially every weather phenomena we observe on Earth is all because of an unstable atmosphere. It's trying to bring itself together and maintain that equilibrium, homeostasis for my science fans out there, and it just can't quite do it. It's physically impossible to maintain that equilibrium with as large of a planet as Earth is, with everything else going on, not only on Earth's surface, but from our solar impacts, solar effects from the sun, from stars, and other planetary features that are in our solar system. There's no way to do it. And that's why we're seeing such a large disruption here. And you can see now, if you look at our coldest colors, it's spread out all in elongated fashion, going way out to the other side of the planet and then spilling south into the upper United States, bringing down that cold air. You can see it in the jet stream as well. This is where we are right now. Notice we're in a little low amplitude. It's still busy out there. We have a big old ridge with very weak troughing on either side of our coastlines for the United States. But then if I fast forward and just rapidly go to that point in time we're looking at, see that? See how now we have a massive trough and a lot of jet energy sweeping through the Ohio, Mississippi valleys, the lower Great Lakes, the mid-Atlantic, northeast United States. And we have multiple, I would say, shortwave troughs digging into the pattern. It looks like we have one there, 1 week one here, 1 week one there. I have another bowling ball ejection going on for Northern California and the Pac Northwest, and all that is just going to continue to channel the cooler air down across the east, and it's going to bring our temperatures down. Not quite as aggressive as we saw in January, so we will not drop into the freezing temperatures, but millions others to our north will, in fact. Here in Central Florida, in my opinion, we're looking at some pretty comfortable relief. Not only should we see a return to rainfall eventually, but we're also going to come down from the 60s and the 80s down to the 50s and the 70s. Maybe the upper 60s the further north you go in our viewing area, and then up towards northern Florida, the Panhandle. The temperature anomaly chart does an even more fantastic job of showing this transition. If you look, there is that negative PNA in full effect. You can see just how warm we are through the southern half of the U.S., especially the further east you go through Dixie Alley, the lower 48, or I should say the southeast quadrant of the U.S., and then you can see those colder shades up in Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, extending towards the west coast. But then watch that big old pattern flip. We're going to go fast forward a little bit more, and bam, there it is. Now we are engulfed with the colder temps once more. And again, not as vigorous or intense as previous with the middle portions of January. You can see the violets and the purples and the pinks still up there around the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin. But regardless, when you translate that down, looking at it from a three-dimensional perspective, it is going to make its way through much of the country, although, Florida's kind of sitting this one out. We got tired of what happened during the last month, so we're like, nah, fam, we're just going to cool off a little bit. We're going to make things comfortable again. And then finally, as we get ready to wrap up, we'll take a look at our latest GFS. We have the pressure gradient here, which is going to be those white lines. Those are your isobars. I have the future cloud cover and the future radar turned on, just to show you that as we go over the next few days, high pressure is going to dominate our pattern. Possible stray shower or two as we go through the weekend and we get that easterly onshore flow. There's always going to be that potential, but then notice what's happening up near St. Louis, parts of Missouri, Illinois. We're going to start to see storm system after storm system really begin to build in as we go through the weekend and then into early next week. Look at that monstrosity that the models are picking up on. And this is why I say that we could get some much needed rain out here with pretty decent fluctuations in our overall temperature conditions, which means our immune systems are going to be working overtime even more as we go over the next 14 days. Allergies have been through the roof. Pollinators are going crazy right now because they think it's springtime since we want to warm up way ahead of schedule, despite what Phil the Groundhog said back on Sunday. We're playing pseudo-spring at this point, trying to bring in what it feels like a typical normal Florida afternoon for many of us. But as a result, with all that warmth entrenched over the south and southeast and the cold air trying to come down from up north, it's going to become a battle zone. And that's why you can see the models get very vigorous with the storm system once again. So the blizzards, the wintry conditions up north are going to come back. And then Lord willing, because our drought is already sneaking back up, we get some rain down here and possible thunderstorms with each of these systems that try to work their way through. You can see right there, even at the end of the loop, by next Wednesday, something possibly trying to favor development back along the Gulf Coast or in the Western Gulf itself. So we shall see. All in all, though, we're not going to be changing too much within the next 7 days. Again, this is more of an extended look ahead. Here's a look at your pinpoint accurate forecast. There go those consistent 80-degree marks across the board from Tuesday up until next week. We do not leave the 80s, and that's for everybody out there. I know this is specifically for Orlando, but in general, for Central Florida, we are going to be sitting under high humidity and very warm temperatures, especially for the time of year. So that's all we got, folks. Thank you again for taking some time out of your Tuesday morning to join me here in the Digital Weather Center. If you have any additional questions or concerns, shoot me an email, dnazario@wkmg.com. Reach out to me over on my social medias, wxcenter_Nazario, or feel free to drop a comment in the comments section of our YouTube live stream. If you're tuning in over on News 6 Plus, head on over to YouTube and pull up the most recent live stream. Drop a comment with any questions, comments, or concerns you may have, and I will get back to you at my earliest convenience. But until then, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday. Little Bird Flew over on News 6 YouTube. You're very welcome, saying thank you for this. Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Always fun getting to talk weather with everybody. So with that, have a beautiful rest of your Tuesday. Stay out of the fog, or as she said, I forget her name, Barbara something from the original John Carpenter, The Fog. Stay clear of the fog. And we'll see you again tomorrow at same time, same place. But until then, this is the Digital Weather Center signing out.